and welcome to the Murder, She Wrote Rewatch podcast. We're back again with the next episode in Season 1, Murder Takes the Bus. Now, this is a rather interesting episode, simply because it plays with your expectations a little bit, and I kind of like that. So we'll get into that in a minute. First off, we're going to take a look at the cast of characters. First off, we have not only Angela Lansbury playing Jessica Fletcher, but Tom Bosley is back as Sheriff Amos Tupper. And I've covered him before in other shows, or in other episodes that he's been in. He's, of course, most known for Happy Days, a cartoon, I think, called Wait Till Your Father Gets Home, and the Father Dowling Mysteries, in which he plays Father Frank Dowling. He's been in other things over the years. He sadly passed away October 19th of 2010. I hope he lived a full life and enjoyed many things, because he is a man I've seen in quite a few shows over the years, and I've always enjoyed seeing him. He's a fantastic actor, and I quite loved him. Let me just take a quick peek, though. Where is it? Murder, She Wrote. Okay. Yes. Now, last episode I mentioned another actor, John Masak, who is playing Sheriff Metzger in Murder, She Wrote for quite a few episodes. I believe Sheriff Metzger takes over when Amos Tupper is no longer around. And he is in... Yeah, he's still in quite a few episodes. Mr. Tupper, Sheriff Tupper's going to be around for a little while. Let's see here. Yeah, Murder Takes the Bus is the 4th episode he's in. And then he's going to be in a few more, because he's in a grand total of 19 episodes of Murder, She Wrote. Last one in 1988, and we're currently in 1985 of this. So we've got a few more episodes to go with good old Sheriff Tupper before he retires. I just wanted to check that just to be sure, because it's been a while since I've looked at Tom Bosley. Who else do we have? Well, we have Terrence Knox, who plays Steve Pascal. In this episode, we see him fairly early on. Let's see, he is most known for Sergeant Clayton Zeke Andrew? I think Andrews. In Tour of Duty. Dr. Peter White in St. Elsewhere, for a good 5 years of that. John Garrett in Children of the Corn 2. Alright, I've seen him in that one, because I've seen Children of the Corn 2. And Tripwire, Jack DeForest. He's known for that one as well. What else has he been in that I may have seen? Obsession. His latest one, he's been announced as Sam in Byers Bog. 2017, Navhote High Priest in Chasing the Star. Was a 2017 movie, I guess. The Agency TV series. He was in an episode of that. An episode of 6 Feet Under. An episode of Walker, Texas Ranger. In 7 episodes of Rescue 77, he was Griffith. Push TV series as Coach Marsh. He was in the pilot. I guess they didn't like him enough to keep him. Murder 1, Douglas Fournier. He was in a couple episodes of that. The Road Home. Don't know that one. Ah, Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman. He was Jason Trask in 2 episodes of that. So that's kind of interesting. I think I remember seeing those episodes. What other one? Where is Murder, She Wrote? Let's find the Murder, She Wrote. Murder, She Wrote. Yep. Just this episode. He also played Rafe Logan in The Dukes of Hazzard. 1981. So, hey. That's kind of interesting. We also have his wife, Jane Pascal, played by Linda Blair. And, yeah, that's the same Linda Blair who was in The Exorcist and The Exorcist 2, The Heretic. She played Reagan McNeil in both of them. Marty Gaines in Hell Night. She played Nancy Aglet in Repossessed, which was a comedy starring Leslie Nielsen, basically parodying the Exorcist. Let me see here. She played Detective Diana Ballard in an episode of Supernatural, the TV series. I think I've seen that one. If that's in the one of the first 5 seasons. What else has she been in? I think she's been in a lot. Godzilla the series, TV series. Psy Factor, Chronicles of the Paranormal. I've seen some of that. She was the voice of Celine in Extreme Ghostbusters, the episode Witchy Woman. Okay. Episode of MacGyver. Yeah. Episode of Moving Target. I don't know that one, but it sounds familiar. And this is the only episode of Murder, She Wrote she was in. But that's kind of cool. The Exorcist, Linda Blair. No wonder I didn't recognize her. She was very young in this one, because she was born in 1959, and this episode came out in 85. So, yeah, she'd have been maybe 25 when this happened. Still, that's pretty cool. Let's see now. Who is going to be next? Let's see. There. Michael Constantine. Michael Constantine plays Ben Gibbons. He's an award-winning Greek-American actor. Michael Constantine. Most known for My Big Fat Greek Wedding as Gus Portokoulos. Okay. Principal Seymour Kaufman in Room 222. Big John in The Hustler. And Gus in My Big Fat Greek Wedding 2. So he definitely has been in a couple of big ones. He was also Gus in My Big Fat Greek Life, the TV series. So definitely filling in, definitely hiring the right ethnicity to play these characters, because he is a Greek American actor. So that's cool. I always like seeing that sort of thing. He played a couple of characters in a couple different episodes of Law and Order. And he played Ben Gibbons in this episode of Murder, She Wrote, and a different character, Lazio, or Lazio Dolby. I'm not sure how that's pronounced. In a different episode of Murder, She Wrote in 1998. And he played LaMonica in an episode of The Law and Harry McGraw. You may remember Harry McGraw from Tough Guys Don't Die. That was the spin-off series that came from it. And Judge Hannibal Kearns in Magnum P.I. in '86. He's been in a lot of cop shows. Remington Steele. He was in an episode of Highway to Heaven. Yeah. Quincy M.E. Pretty cool. He's been around a lot too. 179 acting credits. From 2016 all the way back to 1949. He's been around. He's been around, this boyo. Alright. Let's take a look at Professor Kent Radford, played by Larry Linville. He is most known for MASH. Major Frank Burns, MASH. That's pretty cool. MASH was a big show. I didn't get to watch it myself, but my father enjoyed watching it quite a bit. He was Dr. Bob in Earth Girls Are Easy. Now, I have seen Earth Girls Are Easy. Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those ones. He also played Mukherjee in The Night Stalker and Rock and Roll High School, Principal McGree. 69 acting credits to his name. His last thing was in 2004, Reverend Lowell, West from North Goes South. Okay. Murder, She Wrote. He played Professor Kent Radford in this episode. He played Lieutenant Stephen Ames in an episode in 1988. And Paige Corbin in an episode in 1995. So it's been about, let's see, it's what? 3 years to that one. And then 7 more years to the next one. Grover Cleveland. He played in Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman. Oh, no, sorry. It wasn't just Rock and Roll High School. It was Rock and Roll High School Forever. My bad. Huh. Grayson Carr in Paper Dolls, the TV series, 1984. Randy Bigelow in Herbie the Love Bug, TV series. I remember Herbie the Love Bug. And Lyle Block. Okay, this is interesting. He plays a character called Lyle Block in 2 episodes of The Jeffersons TV series. Now, remember The Jeffersons, I used to watch it. But then there was another TV series called Checking In, which I don't know about, that he also played Lyle Block in. And that one is... Okay. Now I see. It was a spin-off series from The Jeffersons, starring Florence Johnson, a hotel maid who was previously seen serving The Jeffersons. Okay. That makes sense. And there was only 4 episodes of it made. Wow. That did not last long. Okay. Kind of interesting. Who else do we have? We had Miriam Radford, Professor Kent Radford's wife, played by Rue McClanahan. Now, Rue McClanahan is, of course, most well known for the Golden Girls television series, playing Blanche Devereaux. And the Golden Girls is one that I enjoyed watching quite a lot when I was younger. With who is it there? Betty White and B. Arthur, Rue McClanahan, and the other one, I can't remember her name offhand. But yeah, she's known for that. It's one of her most well-known roles. She was also in Starship Troopers as biology teacher. It's been a while since I've seen Starship Troopers. I may have to check it out again just to see her in that. She played Vivian Cavender Harmon in Maude, starring B. Arthur, and Caroline Johnson in Another World for 6 years. So she's been around a bit. Peggy Ingram in Sordid Lives, the series. Lois McIntyre in an episode of Law & Order in 2009. And Meet the Browns was her last acting role in 2009 in an episode of that. Yeah, she passed away in 2010. I remember hearing about it in the news back then. It's quite sad. What else has she been in? Touched by an Angel. She played Leela Winslow and Amelia Bowthorpe Archibald. That second one, Amelia Bowthorpe Archibald, was in 1994, and then Lila Winslow was in a two-parter in 2001. So that's a good 7 years difference. Grandma Loring in Safe Harbor, she's been in. I don't know that one. Huh. The Golden Palace. What is this? Blanche Devereaux in The Golden Palace. Why do I not know of this? 1992 to 1993 TV series. Oh. Maybe I did see of this. The Golden Palace. Dorothy got married again. Blanche, Rose, and Sophia opened a hotel called the Golden Palace. Estelle Getty. That's the name of Sophia. Okay. I might have to see if I can find that particular show. It's only 24 episodes. Huh. That is interesting. I may have to see about finding that for my parents. They own all of the Golden Girls television series and enjoyed it as much as I did. See, doing this rewatch is letting me find cool things out. So I'm happy about that. Who else do we have? So yeah, she is the wife of Professor Kent Radner. Then we have Joe Downing, played by Albert Salmi. And Albert Salmi is most known for Caddyshack, Mr. Noonan. He was Pete Ritter in Petrocelli. He was E1 in Escape from the Planet of the Apes. And he was Grail in Dragon Slayer. His last known acting credit was in 1989, Till We Meet Again TV miniseries. He was in 2 episodes of it. He passed away back in 1990. Let's see. Knots Landing. I vaguely recall that one. He was in a few episodes of that. Just the one episode of Murder, She Wrote. He was in an episode of The A-Team and an episode of Knight Rider. Buck Rayburn in Knight Rider. Simon and Simon. Now that's a show I remember. He was in a few episodes of Dallas. A lot of the older shows. He plays a ship captain in this one. We also have Cyrus Leffingwell, played by David Wayne. We got a fairly large cast in this episode. He passed away 1995 at the age of 81. And he is most known for Dr. Charles Dutton in The Andromeda Strain, Kip Lurie in Adam's Rib, Freddie Denmark in How to Marry a Millionaire, and Dr. Amos Weatherby in House Calls. Poker Alice was a TV movie, his last role. He played Amos in 1987. He was in an episode of Golden Girls called Big Daddy. I think that may have been Blanche Devereaux's father. Because I remember that character, Blanche Devereaux, always calling him Big Daddy. Maybe. Cyrus Leffingwell, the only episode... This is the only episode of Murder, She Wrote he was in. Dr. George Weiler in St. Elsewhere. House Calls, 57 episodes of that, so that was a fairly big one. A few episodes of Dallas. Ellery Queen, TV series. He played Inspector Richard Queen in 23 episodes of that. That's kind of interesting. I always wanted to check out Ellery Queen. So yeah, that's pretty good. Whoa, hello. What is this? The Andromeda Strain, Dr. Charles Dutton. However, he played Charles Dutton in 15 episodes of The Good Life. Huh. I don't know if that is connected to the Andromeda Strain. I don't think so. I think it's just a coincidence. What else? Who else do we have? We have Ralph Leary, played by Mills Watson, who is the owner of a diner. He is most known for Papillon. He was a guard. He was Gary Purvier in Cujo. Deputy Perkins in The Misadventures of Sheriff Lobo. And he was the narc's Harry in Up in Smoke, Cheech and Chong movie. What else? He played Ralph Leary in this episode of Murder, She Wrote. And he played Glenn Roy Sitwell in another episode in 1987. Oh! And he played Stryker in 2 episodes of The A-Team. I remember Stryker. That's kind of cool. Harper Valley PTA, Uncle Buster. 17 episodes of that, and 38 episodes of The Misadventures of Sheriff Lobo. Deputy Perkins, and then BJ and the Bear, Deputy Perkins, which is probably a probably a spin-off of The Misadventures of Sheriff Lobo. Maybe. Yep. Sheriff Lobo is the spin-off from BJ and the Bear, because Sheriff Lobo is the corrupt sheriff from Orley County who appeared in several episodes during the first season of BJ and the Bear, as BJ's occasional nemesis. He now stars in his own TV show. Okay, that makes sense. Lots of spin-offs back in the day. We also have a Carrie Drayson, played by Dawn Stroud, who is known for... Oh, he's been in some recent ones. He's known for Sheriff Bill Sharp in Django Unchained. Father Bolin in the Amityville Horror. Jesse in the Buddy Holly story. And Heller in License to Kill, 007, James Bond movie from 1989. Glenn Now and Then is a short, 2017. He plays Glenn in it. That's his most recent work. Nash Bridges, Gordon Shaw, he was in that. He was Boggs and Caliban in 2 different episodes of Babylon 5. Walker, Texas Ranger. The Adventures of Briscoe County Jr. Good old Bruce Campbell movie, or television show. He played Carrie Drayson here, and Phil Shannon in another episode of Murder, She Wrote in 1993. Huh. Wow. Okay, he was in a few movies. The Rollerblade 7. He played the Desert Marauder. He played Conga Man in Return of the Rollerblade 7. And he played Kabuki Devil in Legend of the Rollerblade 7. I have not heard of these movies. Captain Lucen in 14 episodes of Dragnet. He's in a couple episodes of MacGyver. The Rollerblade 7. In a futuristic society, a sword-wielding roller skater fights evil ninjas, punk roller skaters, and is sent on an important rescue mission. That is the Rollerblade 7. What is Return of the Rollerblade 7? Basically the same thing, only more. Okay. I may have to, in a post-apocalyptic world where rollerblading is the chief means of travel, the evil pharaoh sends his minions outside the wheel zone to abduct a psychic. Wow. Rollerblade Warriors Taken by Force. Frogtown 2. Rollerblade. Toad Warrior. Unbelievable. I've never heard of these movies, but I may have to track them down. That looks amazing. It's probably going to be horrible, but it looks amazing. Okay. And last but not least, we have Gilbert Stoner, played by John Davis Chandler. His last known work, he passed away in February of 2010. His last known work was Star Trek Deep Space Nine. He played, what is that, Filth? I think that's Filth. Flith. Honor Among Thieves in that episode. He is most known for the first bounty hunter in The Outlaw Josie Wales, Bleak in Adventures in Babysitting, which I own, Jimmy Hammond in Ride the High Country, and Henry in Phantasm 3, Lord of the Dead. I wonder if he was in anything else, any other Phantasm movies. Murder, She Wrote. John Detweiler in 1986. So we'll be seeing him soon in an episode of Murder, She Wrote, as well as this one. Fantasy Island. Yeah, I don't think he was in any of the other Phantasm movies. But he plays Gilbert Stoner, our victim. So, let us delve into the episode itself. Because the episode itself is kind of cool. And I've probably been rambling quite a bit too much. So everything kind of starts off with the sheriff's car getting fixed by a mechanic. Sheriff Tupper and Miss Fletcher are there waiting by it, and Sheriff Tupper is apologizing for all this trouble with the car and everything, and they'll just take the bus to get to Boston, where there's some kind of a sheriff's gathering that Miss Fletcher is going to be giving a speech at. We then go to the bus stop, and we see the young man, Mr. Pascal, and his wife coming out. And his wife is trying to tell him to, just don't, you don't need to do this. Talking to her husband, and he's like, just stay out of it, okay? Just stay out of it. You don't need to worry about that. We see Mr. Leffenweiler? I think that is. What is his name? I can't remember his name. He has a very weird name. I'm going to double check his name real quick. Leffingwell. Cyrus Leffingwell. We see him coming up and exchanging some small talk with Miss Fletcher. As thunder and lightning are flashing in the distance, he's basically saying it's going to be raining soon. Then the bus pulls up. And the driver, Mr. Constantine there, Mr. Ben Gibbons, he climbs out of the bus, welcomes everybody, saying it's the bus to Boston. He starts taking tickets from people. Miss Fletcher, of course, asks where the usual bus driver is. And he says, oh, he called in sick. I'm filling in for him. Then she goes and climbs up on the bus while the sheriff is getting things ready out there. And as she gets on the bus, we see Joe Downing, the ship captain, is already on the bus. And it zooms in on his face as he's looking at Miss Fletcher. We also see Miriam Radford and her husband. Her husband is completely focused on what he's doing. But Miriam recognizes Jessica as being a mystery writer and seems very, very excited. Seems to be a big fan of the work. Then everybody gets on. The bus driver says that the bus is heading to Boston. Going to be stopping at Newcastle. Closes the door and off they go. We see rain coming down in sheets. We see lightning across the sky. It is nasty, nasty weather. And we see the bus driving along, and there's a car following the bus. Now, I didn't think much of it at first, but we see the bus, we see the car and the bus together a couple more times. As the bus is going, we see a sign on a fence saying that the prison entrance is 300 yards that way. And there's a bus stop there, and a man at the bus stop is waving for the bus. He climbs up onto the bus, and you get this immediate look on his face that he's recognized somebody on the bus. And he goes and pays for his tickets. And the bus driver doesn't look at him. Doesn't make eye contact. As the bus pulls away, we also see the car behind the bus still following. Miss Fletcher, of course, notes the fellow getting on the bus, and he has a very old book with him. Very well-worn dust jacket. The Night the Hangman Sang. Next thing we see is the bus pulling up to a couple of men in rain slickers who are informing them that the road's pretty bad up ahead. There's no telling how long it's going to stay open. And to be careful. Now, as he's getting out, the car that's been following the bus passes the bus and keeps going ahead. And then the bus heads on out. We see Miriam Radford sneaking up and having a word with Miss Fletcher about how much she likes her books and everything, and makes mention that it's on her top. Her books are in the top 10 most stolen list because she's a librarian, and people always check out her books and then never return them. Miss Fletcher's, of course, well, thank you for the compliment. At least I think that's a compliment. She then goes back to her husband. And the bus continues on its journey until it comes across the fellow in the car who passed them. And his car is like right up on the side of the road. He waves down the bus and climbs up onto it. And him and the bus driver have a little talk because the bus driver remembers seeing him in his car following them, and he's like, "Yeah, I figured you were going to be, keeping me out of the worst of it. It's like I should have stayed behind you instead of pulling ahead back there a ways." But he pays for his ticket and he goes and has a seat. But as he's taking off his jacket and whatnot and putting it up, Miss Fletcher gets a chance to see the fact that he's carrying a gun under his jacket. Something going on. The bus continues on its little journey through heavily raining streets, the Down East coach lines, and it pulls into the Cozy Corner Kitchen. All three words beginning with a K. Cozy Corner Kitchen. The bus pulls in and comes to a stop, and the driver announces that he's having a bit of engine trouble, so if they want to get out and stretch their legs a bit, that would be good. So everybody starts getting up. Sheriff Tupper's been asleep this whole time, so Miss Fletcher wakes him up. Miss Pascal tries talking to her husband again, getting him to, just leave well enough alone, but he tells her to just mind her own business and he'll take care of it. We see Jessica making note of the fact that their operator's name is Ben Gibbons. We see Ralph. At least I think it's Ralph. Ralph Leary. He opens the door and get some people, because the people are all in here now all of a sudden, and ask if they want anything. Starts putting on some coffee and some tea for people that want it. There's even a bar next door that the good ship captain wants a drink from, and he'll open that up in a minute as soon as he takes care of some of the other people here. There are little discussions here and there. We find out that the professor is actually a mathematics professor and is very interested in statistics and anomalies. They start having, just general discussions about the storm and, small talk. The good old sheriff goes and gets a menu, and Jessica happens to see Mr. Pascal having an argument with the man who got on the bus, Mr. Stoner. And then Mr. Pascal is in and going and sitting with his wife as if nothing is wrong. Everything seems very nice. And despite the storm going on and them being stopped and whatnot, Pascal asks for a phone, and Ralph tells him there's a payphone outside, so he goes back outside. And Jessica asks for some pie that's over there, because she sees some apple pie to go with her tea. The next thing we see is them finishing off their pie. Jessica is, of course, quite impressed with the baking skills of Mr. Leary. The bus driver comes back in and says that no, they're not. The engine's not fixed yet. He just needs to come in and dry off for a bit because it's very, very wet out there. Jessica actually starts looking for something and realizes she may have left it out on the bus. So she goes and puts on her jacket and heads out to get on the bus and find it. And this is where things get interesting, because up in on the bus, Mr. Stoner is there. And of course Jessica is like, "Oh, Mr. Stoner, you shouldn't be sleeping here." Only when she goes to shake him, to wake him up, he falls over and there's a screwdriver stuck right into the back of his neck. Oh dear. Next thing we see is the sheriff on board with Miss Fletcher, looking over the body and whatnot. Jessica is, of course, is laying it out that whoever murdered him has to be somebody on the bus or in the diner. It's got to be. He, of course, searches the man's coat, doesn't find anything. Oh, pardon me. Not immediately. They do end up finding something eventually. Jessica is, of course, fairly convinced that he is a prisoner just released, because he's got a new suit, new shoes. He paid for his ticket in crisp new bills. And soon enough, they do notice something and find his wallet on the floor with his release papers, and find out his name was Mr. Gilbert Stoner. Jessica seems to be thinking she's heard that name before. As they're deliberating on what to do next, Miss Miriam Radford comes on the bus, and of course sees the body and practically faints. It cuts to the diner where Miriam's husband is kind of trying to calm her down, but she's kind of a little bit hysterical. And the phones are dead. There's no communication with the outside world. They're all stuck there because the bus is currently not working. Miriam's quite upset the fact that she's stuck someplace that could be a killer, where there could be a killer. She seems overly paranoid, even accusing the man who runs the diner of trying to poison her with the coffee that he's made. To which he just takes a drink from one of the cups and gives her this flat look. Sheriff Tupper then gets up and talks to everybody and wants to get everybody's names, why they were on the bus, and to try and find out who killed them. So there are definitely some stuff going around. We find out that the Professor Radner is a professor of mathematics. We find out that Joe Downing's a ship captain. He was visiting family and was going back to his boat. We know that Mr. Leffingwell is a retired postman. Then he starts asking where people were, and we find out that Mr. Leffingwell was in the gift shop, Mr. Downing was in the bar, the good professor was playing a video game because he's interested in statistics, and the game's also fun. There's a little game called Roadhog, which is really kind of amusing for the professor. One fellow, Mr. Pascal, was out on the phone. We get to see these wonderful little things, and the bus driver was, of course, working on the engine the whole time. Now, Mr. Pascal, we find out that Mr. Stoner, the man who's been killed, had a picture in his wallet of a few people, and one of the men in the picture bears a strong resemblance to Mr. Pascal. And of course, Mr. Pascal is like, I don't have to tell you anything. Meh. So he's a strong suspect right from the start. What's his name? Mr. Drayson. We find out from him that he is a jewelry salesman. And he has a briefcase full of jewelry samples. He was in the bathroom drying off his clothes and whatnot. Miss Fletcher, of course, brings up the fact that he has a gun. He produces a concealed carry permit because he is because of these jewelry samples, so he needs to defend himself, which is fairly reasonable. The good sheriff tries to get him to hand the gun over, but he doesn't want any of that. Now, the sheriff has the murder weapon, and he takes it out and is questioning the bus driver. And the bus driver's like, that was in his toolbox. Anybody could have stolen that out of it. it's an interesting, intense moment with everybody kind of wondering about what's going on. We also find out that the man in the picture is Steve's father. And that he was the one, he was killed during a bank robbery. And that is when the we also see Jessica then on the next scene, I should say. Jessica is checking out where the arcade machines are and the gift shop, and finding out that there's an exit to outside from where the gift shop and the arcade machines are. There's an exit leading from the kitchen as well, and an exit leading from the bar. He's like, any of them could have slipped outside without anybody else noticing. There's a wonderful little moment too where Jessica is saying, weren't you going to check outside? And you know the sheriff wasn't going to, but he's like, oh yes ma'am, I was. Would you like to come along? And out they go. They check the toolbox and find out that it was unlocked, just like the bus driver said. Miss Fletcher tries starting the bus, but there's a light on that the sheriff notices, an emergency damper light, and he's like, I used to drive a bus for a year there before I joined the force. I'm going to go check on something. So he goes to check on something with the engine. Miss Fletcher, in the meantime, goes and takes a little run around the diner, checking all the doors and seeing which ones open from the outside and which ones don't. She tries one, no avail. The next one she tries opens, and we see the cook, the guy in the diner, Mr. Leary, in the kitchen. Then she heads around to the next one, and it opens up. And of course, in the light of the open door, she sees a suitcase laying on the ground, open, full of stuff. And she starts trying to get it back together. We see Mr. Pascal then poking his nose out the door, looking at her. And he wants to have a word with her. So she gets him to help her bring the suitcase in. And they start looking through it. And having a word with Mr. Pascal. And we find out the truth that his father was part of this big bank heist that happened. That Mr. Stoner was a part of. And there was an innocent victim that ended up dying in the bank heist as well. And he was coming to confront Mr. Stoner, maybe even get revenge for the death of his father. And he knew about it because there was an article in the paper, and he produces this article, and it shows that it makes mention of pardon me, got a bit of a hiccup here. Let me take care of that. So yeah, he produces the article, and they have a good read of it, and they found out that the name of the innocent bystander that ended up getting killed was Julia Gibbons. And of course, Miss Fletcher remembers that the driver's name is Ben Gibbons. And at that point, the sheriff tells Miss Fletcher that he knows who killed Mr. Stoner. He knew a half hour ago. And he accuses Mr. Ben Gibbons Makes a citizen's arrest he's planning on doing. And of course, he lays it all out that, Julia Gibbons was this man's daughter. That we find out. And he confronts him and stabbed him with a screwdriver. And he confesses. He confesses right on the spot to breaking down, stabbing the man with a screwdriver, and faking the bus problems because the emergency damper's on, and that will cause the engine to stall. And you need to close the damper again using a long instrument because it's way in the back of the engine, like the screwdriver that he would have had to have on him all the time. Now, with this confession, however, Miss Fletcher says, "No, I'm sorry, Amos. As much as I want to believe that he killed him, I do believe that Mr. Gibbons stabbed him, but not that he killed him, because there wasn't a lot of blood on the screwdriver or in the wound, because he was already dead when he was stabbed. The lividity, the blood had all pooled down into his legs instead of being up in his neck and whatnot. There were bruises also around his neck that they had noticed. It was strangled before he was murdered, before he was stabbed." Which means the killer is still at large. We see Amos trying the phone again, to no avail, outside the payphone. Everybody's kind of tense and sitting around. They're going to try the phone again in a half hour. Ralph remembers that there's a CB radio in the back, but he doesn't know how to use it. But maybe they could use it to try and get some help. There's some more small talk, whatnot, going on around. Jessica notices the briefcase that Mr. Drayson left sitting on the table, and she goes in to have a word with Mr. Drayson as he's trying to use the CB, and that she doesn't believe he is who he says he is, because he's very careless. I mean, leaving a briefcase full of valuable jewelry samples just laying around out there, anybody with sticky fingers could have walked off with them. So Mr. Drayson then admits he's not a jewelry salesman. He is, in fact, an insurance agent from the company that insured the Danvers Bank that the heist happened. And he's following Mr. Stoner, or was, hoping to get led to the money. But now that Mr. Stoner's dead, he thinks maybe whoever killed them might know where the money is as well. Jessica is working through everything. You can see the wheels turning in her head. And she has an idea. She goes back out to the bus because his overcoat and his book that Mr. Stoner had is missing. When she gets there, she has a little look around and realizes the seat that he was found in is not the seat that he was sitting in. Goes back a couple seats and finds the book, The Night the Hangman Sang, by Hamilton Pixond, I think. And the and his overcoat. And it's very odd to Jessica because the book, the dust jacket, is very, very beaten up. But the book itself has been hardly read. Which makes her wonder. The lights then go out. So they go out to start up the generator, the sheriff and Ralph. And while they're working on that, Jessica, in the darkened room, happens to see somebody run out of the room toward the back. And she gets up to go and have a look because shortly thereafter we hear a gunshot. She runs back and finds Mr. Drayson laying on the ground with a bit of a bullet wound in his arm. And the CB smashed to pieces. Everybody gets searching for the gun as Mr. Drayson gets his wound tended to. The good old ship captain helps to finish bandaging up the wound. And of course, Mr. Drayson didn't see his attacker. It all happened too fast. But the book is now missing. And Miss Fletcher believes that the person who took the book is not the same as the person who hurt Mr. Drayson. She thinks that the one who took the book is actually Mrs. Radford. And asks to look in her knitting bag, one of the places that the book could have been stuffed into. Of course, she doesn't want to, and her husband is basically like, well, just show it. It's completely ridiculous. And of course, he dumps out the knitting bag, and there's the book. And the reason why she took it is because the book itself is the only book written by that author. It's worth money. It would have been worth a lot more money if the dust jacket hadn't been all beaten up, but it's still worth money. Something they could have that she could sell for, some more money than what they have. And Jessica is, of course, very curious again. And she takes the dust jacket off the book and examines it in greater detail. And ends up finding a safe deposit box key hidden down the binding of the book, which is probably where the money is. Then she asks about the ship captain, because the ship captain did not tie a knot that most ship captains would tie. He then pulls the gun out of the sheriff's coat because he was pretty sure that's one of the places that the sheriff wouldn't look for it. And we know that the ship captain was the third man in the heist. The door suddenly gets banged open by the storm. There is a scuffle. The sheriff and the ship captain, Mr. Pascal, punches the ship captain out, or supposed ship captain. And of course he then is saying, I didn't kill him. I searched him. But I didn't kill him. He was dead when I got there. So it's very back and forth, bouncing around. And that's when Mrs. Fletcher realizes. She apologizes to Amos, saying that he was right all along. And that Mr. Gibbons is the one who murdered him. And she lays it out that he strangled him first, but then realized after the fact that the coroner would find the body and realize that he had been strangled. So went back and stabbed him with the screwdriver, and then admitted to stabbing him with the screwdriver to take the suspicion off him. Which is very clever. Very, very clever. It's the sort of thing that you're just like, really? I mean, back in the 80s, when this was done, 1985, this came out. Back then, this was not the sort of thing like police and whatnot. There wasn't a lot of weight put on forensic evidence back then. Not like it is like today. Not like you'd see on like CSI or any of them. So back then, this could have worked to have gotten him off. But yeah, apparently the man that he killed was not a very nice man. Very cold and whatnot. And didn't really care that he had killed his daughter back in the day. So the last thing we see is, of course, the weather is now done up. Everybody else is getting on the bus to finally be on their way. Mr. Sheriff Tupper and Miss Fletcher are going back to Cabot Cove. And little Sheriff Tupper is, sad that they didn't get to go there because somebody else had to give a speech, and he's the sort of fellow that likes to hear the sound of his own voice. And that he really wished they could have been there because he was right. It was his lucky. It was going to be a lucky night for him. And of course, Mrs. Fletcher is like, "Oh, I'm sorry, but you don't really need that big screen TV, Amos." And he's like, "But it wasn't my name they called, Miss Fletcher. It was yours in the raffle." And she's like, "What?" And credits. So they end on that moment where it's like, she would have won a big screen TV. Kind of a very, very interesting and intimate back and forth where you're never quite sure who's the murderer in this, because you've got a good 3 to 4 people with motives, all trapped in the same area, all with access and motive to all this. So it was really quite an interesting episode. I liked it a lot. It was enjoyable. So yeah, that's going to be it for this episode of the Murder, She Wrote Rewatch podcast. Thank you all so much for watching. As always, if you like what I'm doing, please give that like button a tap. Give that subscribe button a tap as well if you haven't already, so you can be kept apprised of when I do new videos. And throw a comment in the comment section. Let me know what you think of this episode if you're watching along with me. Let me know what you think is going to be coming next, because I can tell you right now it might not be what you think, but I'd love to get a discussion going with some people on this particular this particular little series that I'm doing. Coming up next, the next episode we'll be tackling is Armed Response. While in the hospital with a fractured leg, Jessica investigates the murder of a doctor. Very, very interesting. I'm kind of looking forward to this episode. So we shall see what's going to happen then. So until next time, you all take care. Enjoy your mysteries. And join me next time for more murder.